This is Michael Clara coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, or as we call it, Crossroads of the West. But at any rate, I just wanted to introduce a video clip that I want to show of a meeting that we had here December 1st, 2015. And in the video, you'll see Archie Archuleta, who is the president of the Utah Coalition of La Raza. And let me give some context to what he's going to talk about in the couple minutes that he does speak and addresses the Board of Education. The problem is that right now we have a superintendent that recently reorganized the school district leadership and appointed all Caucasian people to the upper echelons, if you will, of the school district. I was opposed to that. Other members of the board were opposed to that. And the community ended up being opposed to it. And we eventually did a vote a couple weeks ago by the board, and his reorganization plan passed on a vote of 5-2. The part that concerns me as a policymaker and one who has a responsibility for the school district is that there's this very heavy negative social capital that's been brought to the organization, and I believe due to the lack of vision and leadership. And since I've been on the board, my experience has been that if I ask questions, I don't expect to get answers. If I ask for documentation, I don't expect for it to be delivered. In fact, my questions are always critiqued for tone and substance, which really is nothing more than a tactic deployed to avoid having to give answers in the first place. Unfortunately, the Salt Lake City School District is an organization that's dominated by cronyism, self-congratulatory, backslapping talk about professionalism. It's almost as if they're trying to convince each other, that they're going in the right direction. And the problem, as I see it, there's just an absence of a countervailing power to insist on something akin to professional results. Instead, we have a situation in which this is the current organization and administration. There's a failure constantly, and it feels like failure, and they're protected by the complexity of the organizational structure that they create by, again, this ideology of professionalism. So we're currently faced with just a social demoralization within the organization. We cannot change. Part of the problem is that I guess I want to say is that we have to address the issue of racism, and that offends people. But I'm convinced that we cannot change racial inequality if we pretend that it does not exist. And just to give you some idea of the umbrella, if you will, that I'd like to see this discussion go throughout the next few months, is that comes from Dr. Gary Howard. He said in this book that I just read by him, he says, my intent, and I want to echo his words, he says, my intent here is to encourage meaningful discourse about whiteness and social dominance in Western educational settings without becoming lost in the cycles of blame, guilt, anger, and denial that have so often in the past prevented honest engagement of these issues. Another quote that I've committed to memory that I'd like to share is from Dr. Peggy McIntosh, that it's instructive here that we kind of look at this issue of race, at least I'm recommending that in this context. She says, I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group. And that's indeed what happened here with the Salt Lake City School District. One last quote I want to share that I've committed to memory is from Dr. Lanny Guinier from Harvard. She says, racism is the maintenance of and the acquiescence in racialized hierarchies governing resource distribution. So here again, we have a bureaucracy that's I call it a pathological bureaucracy that encourages the degradation of civic discourse. So, I want to move on now to Archie Archuleta and just say,
My name is Archie Archuleta, and I'm representing a number of people. And I have come before you not to tear our district nor our board down, because through the years since I've been on board here in 1953, principals and superintendents and boards of education have tried very hard to right the civil rights and the civil liberties ideas of our district. We've done a fairly good job. However, the demographics of our district for students show that 57% of the student body is minority, ethnic minority. The revamping of the system, and once Mr. Garcia left, has caused us all a lot of alarm. Not so much because the alarm comes basically from the idea that in the haste to pass this piece of policy, minorities were left off of the composition, inadvertently or advertently. And so it causes us great consternation. Staff, community, and a number of organizations have all come together. At the last meeting, we came black, white, and brown to petition you to reconsider the new policy. There are several ways we can go. That disharmony that this thing is causing in our district, among our people, it started to grow. And it may be a mistake of the perception of what took place, and maybe not. So one of the questions that we have for you is, rather than allow this to escalate into something pretty ugly, we ask you to take a deep breath, take a step back, look at the policy again, try, bring it back to the constituency, not only teachers and administrators, but the community. Show us how this will really improve hiring of minorities in upper echelon positions. That's one possibility. The second one, all of this rests not in the hands of McKell, our superintendent, but in the hands of you, the board. And we're petitioning you to look at it again. Please look at it again and begin to look at it in such a way that you may either think about it, step back, and maybe it's a good plan, maybe it's not, but let's vet it. Let's get it out there to the public. The second question is, you could easily rescind it. That may not be your choice. So we have another choice. And that is, let's look at it, see if it's what we really all want. And thirdly, make sure that when you finally reach the end of what you want to do as a policy, that there not be a whiff of discrimination in it. Right now, this is the thing that is bothering our people, is that it's not outright racism, but it's getting close. It has a whiff of get rid of the minorities. And I know that's not your intention. I've been in this district too long. That is not the intention, but that is the perception. And we need to look at that. Take a second, take a deep breath, step back once more, and let's look at this. It can still be remedied. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, even though my name wasn't there.
So, Ms. Williams and Archie, could you both make sure we have your written comments so that we can send you answers?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. All right, highlights from school.
Tiffany, so I'd like to ask, is McKell, so is there any intention on your part to, how are we going to address the concerns of the community? I mean, are we going to ignore it and just move on, or do you have some recommendation on how you can respond to what we've heard tonight and the last 2 weeks?
That's an incredible question after spending 45 minutes in the last meeting talking about that. And be happy if it's on a future agenda to go back and deal with that. We've never ignored the requests of the district, worked very closely with Archie and other advocates for years, we'll continue to do so. Clearly people have been given misinformation and that's been leveraged negatively, but it doesn't matter. The need to recruit and retain a diverse group of employees in every position in the district remains paramount. So it's not on the agenda to talk about this tonight, but there is no avoiding it. It was talked about in depth before and be happy to meet with any group going forward.
Well, I'd like to request that we put it on the January agenda and discuss it and respond to these questions that people in the community have tonight. Because I hear that a lot, that there was misinformation out there, but you never offer any. What is the misinformation that needs to be corrected? What I'm hearing is that they're responding to what's happened, not misinformation.
So I'm going to stop the discussion now, and we will put it on the agenda, hopefully in January, and we will discuss it at that point. Thank you. Moving on. Mindy, do you want to bring your group up? Tell us how wonderful your school is?
Yes, I
Thanks.
would love to. Come on up.